So it's an interesting problem here because often attorneys will say, "Well, I don't want to tell my doctor what to do," uh, and but yet if the doctors aren't guided, perhaps in some ways to say, "Look, objective evidence is really important in litigated cases." It may be that a doctor feels that, well, you know, I know that there may be a herniated disc, but the symptoms aren't calling for necessarily surgical case. So why spend the money on an MRI when I know that there's no surgery necessarily required? Uh, so there is certainly that disconnect between the attorney and the physician, whereas the insurance company needs objective verification of the problem. So how do you address this?
Well, actually, I think it can be addressed. First of all, attorneys can't sit back on the intake of a client and do nothing and just say, well, I'm going to let the doctors diagnose the injuries or identify what's wrong. The attorneys need to do a proper intake and walk through all of the possible injuries from head to toe with their client. That's education. That is not uh,
Practicing medicine per
no,
se.
and it's not telling the client you need to recognize that you might have these injuries and then falsely make a claim either. It's identifying what Joe Public has no experience in, has no medical training in, to identify for themselves. And and I'm sure you realize this and experienced it, the public do not know what injuries they have. They are completely naive in this area. So the first thing that needs to happen is the attorney to open up the possibility of different areas where injuries might have occurred. And they need to be trained in that area. Moving forward, then that patient can go to the doctor and not diagnose, not tell the doctor what injuries they have, but they will be able to effectively communicate all of the different areas of the body that they are experiencing some manifestation caused by the accident. Then the doctor can do a proper routine intake diagnostic process. From there, he can move to the objective testing, the flexion extension x rays, and the MRI. And if the physicians recognize, especially chiropractors, that to not do x rays, to not do flexion extension x rays, that's not helping their patient. That's not helping them. In fact, it could be placing them in a very precarious position, especially adjusting a prolapse, a bulge, a herniation, a dislocation, a fracture, and then causing more serious injuries.
So Jim, let's so in some ways, what I'm seeing your function, what you've been trying to do, is to really become a bridge between in this triangle
That's right.
of the missing information, missing language, nomenclature, as we may call it, um, and we do know, and this is something you teach often, is that the insurance companies actually have algorithms and software to determine what's appropriate in a case and how to treat and how to value cases as such.
That's correct.
And this is something that you're often teaching about. It'd be interesting, right, if the doctors and the attorneys actually knew the language, the German, as you were calling it, that the insurance companies may be speaking. If they knew that language, they'd be more effective in what should and can be provided to the patient, and perhaps even be more effective in helping insurance companies get to understanding the case better.
Perfect.
Is this something that is that part of your teaching and what you're doing with Colossus and Teach and softwares as such?
Oh, absolutely. Trying to educate all three corners of that triangle so that there's effective communication is the hardest thing in the world because they're not talking to begin with. In fact, and this is not a popular thought, but each point of that triangle hate each other.
Mm.
Chiropractors blame attorneys for taking all the money. Attorneys blame chiropractors for treating too much and taking all the money, and the insurance carriers blame both of them for eating up all the profits. But when I go out into the field and I talk to doctors and I talk to lawyers, I try to teach them about Colossus, about ICE, about about all of the different software. And right now there are 87 different softwares in use by the insurance industry in attempting to analyze the value of a claim. Now, you might say, well, gee, how can a non human analyze and determine the injuries and manifestations of a human? And it can't be done. But you have to look at it from the insurance perspective. State Farm receives 35,000 injury claims a day. There isn't enough time, there isn't enough information available to each of the adjusters handling those 35,000 claims that they can do it as expert humans. So they have to use software. Attorneys don't understand that the authority that's being placed on that claim to settle the claim is being determined by some sort of mathematical algorithm. So if I could teach the mathematical algorithm to every attorney, essentially the attorney would just say, okay, apply it to bingo. If I got a bingo, I'd win bingo. So I have to know how to get B, how to get I, how to get N, etc. Right? So that's what I teach the attorneys and how to establish the different parts of the software that is going to place authority on the claim. With doctors, I try to tell them or to educate them so that they can document in such a way, beginning with diagnosis, but then document in such a way that they can feed the BINGO to the insurance company in SOAP notes and medical reports, and then provide that to the attorneys. Now you have a cohesive communication circle.
But if you have 87 such different softwares, are they pretty similar to each other, or how does that work out?
They have similarities, but they do differ. And it is in intricate parts that they differ. And understand, it's not just the barrier of the software that is being used by the insurance industry that keeps chiropractors or physicians, medical doctors, and attorneys from communicating effectively. It's also the claim practice procedure program that applies the software and governs how the adjusters are to use the software. So there's that complication. Most of the programs, most of the softwares have a basic algorithm that can be taught to everybody so that everybody is on the same page. If that occurs, then your doctors would be responding to that algorithm, and attorneys would be communicating to the insurance industry within that algorithm. If, if both doctors and lawyers then were cognizant of the claim practice procedure programs as to how those algorithms are to be applied, and it's not rocket science. Trust me, it can't be rocket science. Then everybody would win. The lawyers, the doctors, and the patients, and including the insurance industry, would win. There'd be as much as 90% less litigation throughout the country if we can move to that direction. There would be settlements that would be fair and reasonable. There would be medical treatment that would be paid for. Remember that there's two different kinds of software every insurance company uses. One is to evaluate a claim. They also use the other software as well that tells the adjuster, okay, this duration type of frequency of treatment will be accepted as reasonable and necessary. And then they also address what's called PCP, prevailing competitive price. But that is all coupled into the medical software that the insurance industry uses. So I educate people, attorneys, doctors, on how to apply, how to communicate with the medical software first, and then communicate with the authorities software.
So your seminars are typically what, 1 day long, or they're 2 days?
They range between 1 and 3 days, depending on what the audience.
And how does one know when you're giving and where you're giving these seminars?
Public seminars are listed either on Sequoia Vision's website or on other groups' website, like the Trial Lawyers Association websites or the Chiropractic Association websites or the AMA websites. And sometimes I'm requested to do a seminar for a specific law firm, and they just want their local doctors involved in that seminar, so it's on their website.
So this keeps you pretty busy.
More busy than I'd like to be. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much. It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you again and teaching us some more. Okay. This is Dr. Sana Khan with Mr. Jim Mathis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.